What if every memory you had could be planted? And what if tomorrow you woke up a murderer who had never existed? The Witness Protocol. Toronto, late evening. In Michael Stone's office, a professor of forensic psychology, the only light burns above the desk. Outside, the city's wet lights blur under the rain. The fan of an old computer hums steadily, filling the silence. On the edge of the desk lies an envelope with no return address, thick, slightly damp from the rain. Stone turns it in his hands, feeling something small and hard shift inside. He carefully tears the paper. A dark flash drive drops into his palm. On its casing, a strip of white electrical tape bears a single word, written in marker: watch. He inserts it into the computer. One file appears. The video starts without an intro. A woman in her mid-30s sits in an empty room with gray walls. Her hair is pulled back, her face pale, her gaze fixed directly on the camera. "I killed him," she says, barely moving her lips. "On Miller Street, near the old warehouse. It was dark, but the lamp by the gate was on. He was holding a yellow umbrella." Stone tenses. Miller Street, the site of an unsolved murder 3 years ago. The umbrella was never mentioned in the press. A different memory flashes. An interrogation 10 years ago. A young man in handcuffs. The trembling voice of a witness, certain he'd seen him at the crime scene. Stone had testified to the reliability of that account. A year later, the real killer was found, but the young man had already broken in prison. Since then, Stone hated the word recognized. The woman in the video goes on, how she hid the knife in a dumpster, how she heard the sound of a train in the distance, how oily glossed mud clung to her boots. Her voice trembles, but the speech flows evenly, as if memorized. The video cuts abruptly, leaving a black screen. Stone stares for several seconds at his own reflection in the monitor. Then he opens the police archives. Everything she said matches the case details, down to the smallest nuance. But her name appears in no file. She was never a witness, a suspect, or a victim. A text message arrives on Stone's phone unknown number. This is only the beginning. The rain hammers harder outside, and in the depth of the shadow across the street, he almost sees a figure staring straight at him. The morning at the university didn't begin with lectures for Michael Stone, but with reviewing the recordings that now haunted him. After the first flash drive, envelopes had begun arriving every week. Different faces, men, women, all ages, but always the same format. A static camera, a muted gray room, a confession to murder with unnerving precision of detail. He spread printed stills across the desk like a mosaic. The first thing he noticed, identical framing in every shot, as if the camera had been placed by blueprint. Then, a strange rhythm in their speech. Stone slowed the playback, turned on a metronome. All the witnesses paused after the fourth or fifth word, as if someone were dictating the text inside their heads. Cross-referencing data, he found a possible lead. In one video, a man casually mentioned participating in a dream modeling program in Chicago. Stone chased that thread. Days of correspondence with colleagues and combing through publications followed. The research center was real, but focused only on theoretical models with no equipment for memory work. When its director confirmed they'd never worked with live witnesses, Stone felt a familiar disappointment. The young man from his past came to mind, and the unpleasant thought that perhaps he was chasing another shadow, trying to atone for a guilt that could never be erased. Returning to the videos, he spotted another clue. In the background noise spectrum of some recordings, a soft, rhythmic hum, like medical equipment. He boosted the audio track and heard a faint electronic beep repeating every 90 seconds. That led to a new connection. In the medical records of one woman from the tapes, there was a note about undergoing a procedure at Somnus Therapeutics, Seattle. Checking others, he found the same name more than once. The Chicago lead was false, but now he had a real direction, and the feeling that behind that name lay something far more dangerous than a sleep lab. The first mention of the place came by accident in scanned medical records of a woman from one of the videos. Listed under procedures, Somnus Therapeutics, Seattle. Stone checked the rest. All had the same sleep clinic, only the dates differed. 3 days later, he was standing at the entrance to a modern glass building on Seattle's outskirts. The sign glowed a soft blue, and inside was sterile quiet. At reception, a friendly woman in immaculate white greeted him. Stone introduced himself as a sleep researcher and asked for a tour. The corridors were identical. White walls, muted lighting, doors labeled polysomnography, cognitive therapy lab. Through glass partitions, he saw patients wired to dozens of sensors. Everything appeared legal, even respectable. The clinic's director, Dr. Lane, appeared in a perfectly tailored suit, posture confident, voice low and almost hypnotic. "We treat nightmares, Professor Stone. Sometimes that means rewriting the past," he said casually, leading his guest on. "People come to us broken and leave free. Is that really so bad?" There was more than medical assurance in his tone. There was a hint of something larger. When Stone asked directly about the patients from his tapes, Lane answered evenly, hiding behind medical confidentiality. In one room, the equipment looked far older, a massive device with a tangle of wires, like a hybrid of MRI and EEG. No label. The door had a magnetic lock. Lane, catching Stone's glance, gently but firmly steered the conversation elsewhere. In the lobby, on the way out, Stone noticed a woman in a gray hooded coat by the elevator, clearly watching him. When their eyes met, she quickly turned away and disappeared behind the doors. Only at his hotel, removing his coat, did he find a nameless business card in his pocket. Just a phone number, slipped there without him noticing. The night was cool and damp. Stone arrived at the pier 10 minutes early. Moonlight picked out the lines of old wooden planks and empty moorings. At the far end stood the woman in the gray hooded coat, arms wrapped around herself as if the wind might carry her away. "Sarah," she introduced herself softly, almost on an exhale. "I used to work at Somnus." She spoke quickly, but avoided his eyes. Her story was disjointed. She mentioned an old polysomnography machine, tracking sleep phases and correcting them with audio waves. But Stone immediately spotted inconsistencies. It didn't match what he'd seen at the clinic. When he pulled out a recorder, Sarah recoiled. "You want to record me?" Her voice shook. "Don't. I already dream too much that isn't mine." Stone powered it off slowly, showing her, then slipped it into his pocket. Trust was clearly costly for her. She fell silent, then added something personal. "You know whose memories I have. A man who drowned 20 years ago. I remember holding his daughter's hand, but I've never seen her. Sometimes I wake up and miss her like my own." Suddenly, Sarah ended the meeting, citing exhaustion, and vanished into the dark. Stone was left with fragments that could be evidence, or just misdirection. 3 days later, the news broke. One of the witnesses had been found dead. Police called it suicide. That night, Sarah called him. Her voice was firm now, stripped of earlier vagueness. "I lied. It's not polysomnography. It's an interface for reading and writing memory. At first, it treated PTSD. Then, it became a weapon." She described it not in clinical terms, but as something archaic and strange. Copper coils, the smell of ozone, a pulsing light synchronized with brainwaves. Most importantly, memories could be recorded and erased. "They use it to fabricate cases," she said, "and sometimes to wipe real killers." Stone realized this wasn't just an accusation. It was an open door into a deeper shadow. All night, Stone pored over Sarah's folder. Medical charts, procedure logs, names of handlers. Near dawn, a strange leak arrived, a small encrypted file with no signature. Subject line, meme. He opened it, and for a split second, the world switched. A wet alley behind the university, a rasp nearby, the cold grip of a knife in his hand. Stone jolted upright, yanking the cable, heart pounding. Whose memory was that, and why did it feel like his? A text followed within minutes. "Keep it off the network. Evidence burns bright." He knew it was Sarah's hand. That morning, he met journalist Daniel Rose. They decided to find the woman from the first video, but 2 days later, she was dead by her own hand. At the modest funeral, among the few present, stood a tall man in a dark coat. He approached Stone. "Sad, but inevitable," he said quietly. "She was unstable. We only accelerated what was coming." "You killed her?" Stone replied. "We save people from real killers who'd never be caught. A few planted lives are a small price for order. And not all confessions are false. Some are real. Sometimes we erase a witness's memory so they can't be found. You expose what protects your students at night." He spoke with doctrine, not greed. "You're playing God," Stone said. "We fix what you break. You give verdicts. We deliver results. Tell me honestly, if you could return that boy from your past to a normal life by erasing his pain, would you refuse?" Stone's answer stuck in his throat. The man nodded, as if hearing silence, and left. That evening, Stone found a yellow envelope in his mailbox. On the flash drive, himself, in a gray room, monotonously confessing to the alley murder behind the university. Every detail matched that brief memory spike from the leak. His phone lit with a message. "The next move is yours." Now he knew. The network had a face, a voice, and an ideology. And it didn't hide. It believed. Stone knew the only way to stop the network was to take the risk and enter where it was strongest. Sarah helped configure the equipment in mirror mode to read rather than implant. She warned, if they know you're coming, they can weave in something that destroys you. The meeting with the antagonist took place in a small conference room under the guise of a closed interview. The camera and neural reading module were disguised as an old dictaphone. Stone asked about cases where the technology had been decisive. When the device began capturing images, Stone saw scenes of planted evidence, pressured witnesses, and suddenly, his own face. He was in the dark university alley, knife in hand, blood on his fingers. So vivid, he instinctively pulled his hand from the panel. "That's a seeded layer," Sarah whispered in his earpiece. They're injecting false images during the read, so you can't use the recording in court. Stone steadied himself and continued. Other images appeared, strange labs, unfamiliar faces, truth and lies interlaced into a dangerous mix. He passed the material to Rose. 2 days later, an edited video of confessions and clinic footage leaked online. The impact was explosive. But the victory was an illusion. Almost immediately, leaks from elsewhere revealed that the exposed group was just one faction of the network. With them gone, control shifted to another, more hidden and more ruthless. That evening, Stone received a flash drive. On it, the antagonist, coatless, staring into the camera. "When someone you love dies, you'll remember me." Stone shut the screen. His victory had been someone else's operation. He was just a tool in a war he didn't know existed. 2 months passed. The city had already forgotten the scandal. Cases against dismissed investigators stalled in court. A few verdicts were overturned, but most false witnesses still lived branded as guilty. The technology hadn't disappeared, only changed hands. At night, Stone's dreams became serialized, each one adding to the same story. Episode 1, the wet alley behind the university, rain-slick asphalt. Episode 2, footsteps behind him, a flash of fear, the cold handle of a knife. Episode 3, a woman falling, the scent of iron in the air. Each morning, he woke with a new fragment, more real, more embedded in memory. Sometimes he caught himself waiting for the next part, as if this wasn't a nightmare, but an unfinished story he had to see through. Once, walking home through a crowded street, he saw in the throng the woman from his dreams. Same dark jacket, damp hair, tired eyes. She stopped and looked at him. His chest tightened. He blinked, and she was gone. Alive or just a planted image? He couldn't tell. Further on, in the mirrored shop front, stood a tall figure in a coat, the antagonist, perfectly still behind him. Stone turned sharply. No one. A thought pierced him. If I can't trust myself, who can I trust? He took a step, watching the glass. His reflection froze, then slowly blinked, out of sync with him.